I'm very excited for today's talk because I have a special guest here today, Dr. Tiffany L. Green. We're actually going to be talking about academic job talks. So it's a little bit more focused, but I think this is so important because the intention, the thought, the capacity that you build to communicate about yourself can really make a difference for how you show up in person, but also for your online presence too. So, Tiffany, would you mind introducing yourself for people?
Hi, I'm Tiffany Green, she, her. I am currently in my day job, an associate professor of obstetrics and gynecology and population health sciences at UW-Madison. I am an economist by training and a population health scientist by practice. And my work really focuses on the causes and consequences of racial inequities in reproductive health, because I believe when people have control and autonomy over their bodies, that everything in society absolutely gets better.
I love that. What a strong introduction. I feel like sometimes when I ask people this question, they are not sure exactly what to focus on. But as the storytelling professor, you had something ready to go. I love that. You're someone who also, along with your academic career, has created a business where you support people to better tell their story and shape their academic job talks and also public speaking. Tell me a little bit about what prompted this journey for you.
Yeah, it's been sort of a long journey, as I was explaining to someone yesterday. I actually did talks when I was younger. I grew up in Southwest Philadelphia, like the Fresh Prince, West Philadelphia, born and raised. And I did, oratorical talks. I did all kinds of talks, but I really started to lean into public speaking when I met my now husband. He was in this organization called Toastmasters International. And I'm like, what's that? You make toast? And like some people or many people, I got sucked in. And within a month, I was in a leadership position in the district. I was giving all kinds of speeches. And as you can see from some of my writing, I actually have a little bit of a bone to pick with Toastmasters when it comes to scholarly speaking. But it was such an essential way that I learned not only to formulate and scaffold my own talks. My mom, I come from a very blunt family, and my mom says, your talks used to be so disorganized, and now they're clear, they're together. Yes, my
Feedback from
family does
mom.
not play. But I also fell in love with coaching people. There's like a speech contest for international speech, which I competed in, and also contests to compete with evaluation. So how well can you support and coach people with talks? And I realized I love that part way more than competing for just my own speeches, right? You always get stuff out of me that I never intended to tell, but here it is. We're talking about that part. But anyway, um, during that time, I also became a TEDx coach. So I coached for 3 rounds of TEDx. And that was really informative for me because academics, we love to squeeze 50, 11 things, as the number goes, into our talks. And I know you know this because you're trying to help people on their website and they give you like 30 things to put on there. And you're like, what is the point? And so from TEDx, I learned the importance of having one idea worth sharing. And it was also very important in a contrast from academia or people's perceptions of Toastmasters, rather. People needed to have one clear idea worth sharing. It wasn't about whether they were amazing speakers. It was about them having an idea worth sharing. And that's what I was kind of missing with Toastmasters, to be honest with you.
Ooh, I like that. What does that mean for the audience when things are more taught, like organized, when they're more scaffolded, when it's one idea? What does that mean for the people who are listening to the talk?
It means they have one thing to focus on. If you're trying to, particularly in age when our attention spans are down, and IMBR, our attention spans are down, people need something to hold on to. People need something to come back to, right? And so that's when I started saying, this is going to be really important. So then I somehow, because I was on Facebook yet again, I don't recommend being on social media as much as I have been and am rather. Somebody put a note in a group I was in, Dr. Tajania Henderson, who at the time was the dean of graduate studies at Rutgers Newark, and she said, I need somebody who's been a TEDx coach and a Toastmaster. And I was like, me. Me. And I ended up since then coaching students at Rutgers Newark for 3 minute thesis, right? But during all of this, I'm giving you sort of I'm going to land this plane, I promise. But during this time, I realized that the place where I was, and no knock to it at all, was not the place for me. And the thing that I had to do was deliver on a job talk. And part of that preparation for the job talk was bringing everything that I had learned from Toastmasters, from TEDx, and the evolution of my work to understand what the one idea we're sharing was. And my one key idea was that in this position, it was a reproductive equity cluster hire. If we want to solve these racial inequities in reproductive health, we have to care about, at the time, women. My thinking is definitely involved since then. Care about people capable of pregnancy. You have to care. You have to care about them whether they're pregnant or not, right? And so I went into that talk, Jennifer. I was secretly pregnant. I was sick as a dog. And I said to my child, I was like, look, we have to get it together because we all have to eat, friend. And we all got to eat.
I love this story.
And, and I told this story that was absolute true. You know, the same techniques that I teach people now. I was up on Facebook late at night and I found the story of this young Black woman who had these big, wonderful dreams. She wanted to own her own hair salon. And then she got pregnant with twins and she got sicker and sicker and sicker. And those babies were born very early. A few days after she gave birth, she went back into the hospital and kept declining and she died. And
Oh,
what I said, right, because I was in a room where I had to give two job talks at the same time to, there are economists like me, political scientists in the policy school, then there are the public health people that don't trust us as far as they can throw us, sometimes for good reason. And I was like, I had to look, I had to bring them all together. And I said, look, I care about this as an economist. I understand the impacts of Black babies being born too light too soon and ready to die before their first year of life compared to other groups. Understand that about Black birthing people, right? And so I understand the economic costs. I understand the policy implications, but as a human, this is why I do that work. And I did that before I hit people with the stats and the other things. And I'm here. I have to say that was a talk, but it was that process of preparation. All of those things led me to understand that a really good job talk can change everything for you. Now I had the receipts to back it up, but having that and teaching people how to do that was something that really motivates me because I think people doing good science deserve to have a stage.
I love that.
Sorry, that was a
Okay.
little long-winded.
No. It was perfect. And I think for everyone listening, hearing your journey is really impactful. And it helps people understand and put themselves in that position of like, oh, I'm vulnerable now. Like I need to have agency in what I'm saying in this room. Okay, so that's kind of my next question. The people who are listening to this, yeah, we've got tons of faculty, administrators, people who support academics, but there's also grad students, people who've never done an academic job talk,
Mhm.
who maybe aren't sure what it looks like or what it means for them. And so, could you give like a what is a job talk definition for people?
Yeah. So in academia is weird. Unlike other jobs where you actually just go and interview and you might meet a few people and then get an offer, unless it's some wildly toxic environment. Academia works mostly like this. We don't have job fairs for the most part for academic positions. You may get a screening interview. Before COVID, everything tended to be in person, but now after the advent of the pandemic, people generally interview people online as well. We might have some conversation there, and then after that, you may or may not be invited to be a finalist. So with a finalist, there usually are no more than a handful of people because it's a lot of work, where you have all day interviews, sometimes 2 to 3 days, where you meet lots of administrators, you meet your potential colleagues, you meet students to find out if you are a good match for the department and vice versa. But the linchpin of all of this is the job talk. It is a 45-minute to an hour talk where you talk about one, your science, who you are as a scientist, what you're working on, what your vision of the future is, right? And it's basically your coming out party as a scientist, so people can understand who you are. And I think one thing that people don't frame this as, but I realized pretty early on, is that a job talk is also about risk mitigation. And what I mean by that is that faculty lines are, even before all of the chaos that's happening now, they're fairly rare. There are departments that are, again, toxic and don't unfairly don't tenure faculty. And I want to be clear that faculty from historically excluded groups like me and others are less likely to get tenure. But for the most part, departments do not want to bring in somebody that they're not going to tenure because they have no guarantee they are going to get another tenure line to teach, to
Right.
do research, to do service, right? So they want to make pretty dang sure that the person that they're bringing in is going to be able to hit the ground running and fulfill the requirements for promotion and tenure at their institution. And so, fair or not, yes, the cover letter matters. Yes, that kind of gets you into that initial screening interview matters. Your teaching statements, your research statements, your curriculum vitae, but most of the committee, they don't always read the job market paper.
Oh
They
no.
don't read it. We're
Oh
not
god.
going to lie today, Jennifer. We're not going to lie. They don't read it. I try to read it when I was search committees, but I knew that, and so that's when the talk becomes really important. Now, some people argue that the job talk has an outsized importance, and to that I say, I like to dream of a world that I'd like to be in, but also I like to be clear with emerging scholars about what the world is. And if you don't give a good job talk, it becomes harder for the people in the room who are advocating for you to have receipts. It's the truth.
Ooh, yeah. This is about advocacy too, right? It's not one person's decision
It's not.
whether, yeah. Mm. Are job talks mostly for tenure track lines, or do they apply to other folks who are applying to different kinds of faculty or research positions?
Yeah, sometimes you have research professors who also give those kinds of talks. You have professors of the practice, which you bring people in who don't always have a PhD, but may have experience in an industry that is really significant. But in general, if you have a tenure track, always. Non-tenure track usually have those as well. If you're in a school of education, a lot of times they will expect both a job talk and a teaching talk. So institutions that really value teaching, all institutions are supposed to value teaching, and it varies by department. But in general, in R1 institutions classified by the Carnegie Foundation, Research One institutions, these are institutions that have I want to say it's like over $50 million in research expenditures a year, like some really wild number, and also graduate a high number of PhDs or doctorates every year. That's considered an R1. So I've been at R1s my entire career, right? So I went to school at UNC. I came to UW-Madison for a postdoc, then went to Virginia Commonwealth University, and then back to UW. So I'll be clear that my experiences are with R1s. If you're at an R2 or a select liberal arts college, right, they're going to value teaching a lot more. Education schools, wherever you are probably going to want to see a separate teaching demonstration. So some schools do that as well.
Okay, great. I really appreciate you sharing that context. I feel like even as someone who's like heard of so like I started my business right after grad school. So like I haven't had to do a job talk personally, but even as someone who's all of my friends have like gone on mostly to academia and they've done job talks, it's not something we talk about. Like it's not something that I've talked about with people in depth. And so hearing from an expert like you, not only have you done one yourself, but you help people to be better at their job talks and to be more successful at them. I really am so grateful for you being open about all of that.
Oh, no
Um,
worries. I just want to make sure, especially with first generation students, there's so much insider baseball, and it's really annoying because I want to see people that do good science win. And I've seen a lot of bad job talks, like really. And it's like, and I tell people, like, your advisor probably got their job in spite of their job talk, not because of it. And the problem
mm,
is that if you have, I was talking to a colleague, if you have a lot of job talks like you might have had a couple years ago, you've got time in case the first one doesn't go that well to pull it together and go to the next one. But right now, it is actually pretty rare for people to even get one or two, given the constraints.
right.
And I'm sure you've talked about this on your podcast and with your clients, given what's happening with the federal government, encroaching authoritarianism,
Mm.
departments being even more risk averse, like making sure that you knock that job talk out of the park has become really, really important. And I think for departments who are not giving their students this training, that are overwhelmed with all the other stuff, it becomes really vital to have someone come in and support you with the systems to do that.
Oh, that's a great segue into another question that I have, which is how can people who are supervisors of grad students, who are, department chairs, and people who have administrative power to bring in speakers, bring in support, send people to the right resources, how can they better support their folks who will need to be doing job talks, especially now that it's like even more important for schools to justify where people are going next and what their lives look like. It's crazy with things that are happening in the federal government. But I'm curious for your thoughts for that.
Yeah, I think I put up a LinkedIn post a little while ago that was like, "Look, if you ain't got no money, right? I gave you the $0 to $500 post. One of the things you can do is potentially work with your teaching center to help your students with their teaching statements. So this is something again that requires more time. Less time, you need to spend more money. More time, you can have a little bit of leeway. And so thinking about not just working on those teaching statements, working on research statements in community, so creating a culture of really, I think rigorous feedback is important. I don't want to get your podcast canceled, Jennifer, but I'm just going to say it, like in public health, it's a little bit different. Like people say economists are really mean, and we can be, that's true. But I came very used to a culture of being interrupted during talks, asking hard questions, going through these whole mental exercises. And unfortunately, that is not the culture in public health. And some people agree or disagree, but I think those I think there's a little bit we can learn from us economists on that end. So I think creating a seminar culture, it doesn't have to be toxic, but it does need to be one where it can't be, well, thank you for your work. That was so good. No, you need to ask actual questions so that students can understand the types of questions that they'll be asked in a seminar. Have them attend job talks in your department, other departments, and have a off the record conversation about what that looks like. I think the big thing though is I'm big on scientific storytelling, and that's what I do a ton of. And so, if you are ready, I like to come in and say, okay, let me hear about your story, because in a world where a Gen AI has become dominant, and we can have arguments about whether it should be or not. As you can guess, I think it should not be, but what it has done is it made it so much easier to produce a CV full of papers. It sped up the process of creating mediocre work. Now, there are some people that can use it and not produce mediocre work, but I would argue it's because they were not producing mediocre work before, right? And so now, hypocritically or not, search committees are going to be looking at these materials and looking at how the cover letters are structured. They're going to be looking at, fairly or not, how many papers you have on your CV and wondering, or were you just part of a productive research lab, or did you bring material contributions to this work? And so it becomes more important to be able to tell your story and tell the story of your work. So when students say things like, well, when someone wants me to tell them about myself, I say, they don't want to hear your life story. They want to hear about you in relationship to the work. Right. And so one example of this is I was coaching students for 3 minute thesis. And one student, he was really great. He was doing work on machine learning and what's it, machine learning and fossils. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool for conservation. I mean, if you like it, I love it. I mean, it sounded cool. I didn't really understand it.
Yeah.
But I was like, this is great. But I am, like I said, I'm a very newsy person. So I'm like, there's got to be something there. And so I thought back to the first question I asked the student, like, tell me something that's unusual about you or unpopular opinion. And he told me that he had reptiles for pets and he left them back home with his mom in Brazil. And I said, oh, okay. And so we kept digging over the course of meetings. And it turns out, I was like, well, why do you have these pets? Like, what is interesting about these pets? And so it turns out that he watched a nature documentary as a kid. And he realized that his animal friends were going to be extinct. And he decided to become a biologist and come to the US
Wow.
to save his animal friends so that his nieces and nephews could also have these animal friends to play with. And that's what I mean by scientific storytelling. I'm not asking you to tell me like what you do, what you eat for breakfast. They don't care about that, but they do care about how you arrive at questions. They do care about what you are adding to the literature and to society. And so that becomes even more high stakes. Students often talk about, in this anti-DEI era, and I want to clarify that DEI has nothing to do with research, unless you're researching DEI. That is a straw man and completely out of pocket, but whatever. And so a lot of people are like not doing equity. So, but the questions often come up when I'm talking to people. I'm like, well, why is what you're doing important? And they'll say, I'm looking at this group. And I'm like, okay, that's not important in and of itself. I don't say it quite like that, but I like, what
There's
is
more
the
to that.
contribution to the science itself? Right. So I have mentees that talk about abortion. I have mentees that talk about all kinds of things. Okay. Well, people don't care about that. They might support abortion, but they don't think about it beyond pro-choice or anti-abortion. What is it that you are adding to the science? What ideas are you pushing forward, and how did you come to those conclusions? That's, I think, the power of scientific storytelling. But a lot of people write like journal articles, or they write like, not great grants. And so what I try to get them to do is use a South Park formula. So, however you feel about Matt and Trey, they can tell a good story. And the reason that they can tell a good story, there's a great video which I will share with you to put in the show notes. And so they go to this class at NYU and they talk about this formula. And it's one I also use. And so they say, you don't go in and say and. It's and therefore, or rather, I think about and but therefore. And so another person who does that really well is Randy Olson, who talks about and but therefore. So I call it the Randy Olson / South Park intersection. So I always talk about and but therefore. I do this, but here is the problem. Therefore, I do this. This is how I'm making that transformation. And so that is what I try really hard to do. So I study all the things that are on the list, right? But I'm always, I'm always talking about, okay, here's the science, friends. I think that there is, people widely believe there's bias in pain treatment. However, this has not been tested in real world settings, and therefore we cannot do anything about it. I am doing this transformation so that, right? So that's how I kind of think about it. And that's what I try to get students to do. I don't want them to, I don't have this like template where like you do this and therefore you're going to get a job by coloring in the numbers.
That makes it sound like it would be so
Jennifer
easy.
never
Why
invited
is
me
it
back,
not
y'all.
like
She has
that?
not invited me back.
Why is it not just coloring in the numbers? No, you don't. It's not like it's
That's not
rhetorical.
science. That's not science.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and
Mm.
so I just want people to reach their highest potential as scholars. I want good work to be in the world. I want messy work, as I like to say in the world. You know, I don't like paint by the numbers work. It's work that's technically proficient but profoundly boring.
You shared that you've seen a lot of bad job talks.
I have.
It sounds like lack of storytelling is one issue, lack of focusing on one idea is an issue. What are some of the other mistakes that people tend to make that you've seen kind of time and time again?
I took a very scientific survey on LinkedIn, and I said, "Hey, senior people, like, what is annoying to you?" And they would say things like, "Can't explain their methods to anybody but a narrow group. They can't give me the big picture." Another big one is people get tripped up in the Q&A because you can't really memorize things for the Q&A. So the way that I try to strategize around that is like, okay, the storytelling is what's going to get you through and explain to people why this is a really big, important idea. And the same way you use that in the method. So I had one student that I was coaching, and he had methods. He was talking about, and yes, I coach students of all genders, but this person happened to be a he. And he was saying, yes, I use archival data to answer this really interesting question. I said, well, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, how long did it take you to collect these data? 5 months. I was like, okay, so that's part of the story. We need to take them on the journey. Like, I was like, how many sources of data? Oh, 9, 10 plus. Okay, that's important, right? So taking people through the process of how you collected the data, how you discovered these pieces of data, then what methods you thought through, why you use this method over this method. It's going to convey confidence. And the thing that I like to tell people, and again, this is like, again, me being an economist, we love to run robustness checks, as the kids say, right? And so I tell people, what question are you scared of people asking? Put that right in the middle of your job talk.
Ooh, I love that. So
Put
you're
it there.
already answering it
So
during the
you're
talk where you're
answering it.
super prepared.
And people like to feel smart, and I definitely believe in using people's foibles against them. So I tell people to say, you might be thinking, oh, they're like, yes, I was, you know. and and you're so right. And here's how I tackled this, right? Because now you're changing the power play here. You're saying, oh, I'm not scared of you asking me questions. I'm putting the thing that is allegedly the most vulnerable thing in front and center. Another way that that comes up is, I wish qualitative researchers would be more aggressive. And what I mean by that is that I am a quantitative researcher by training, but all of my lab research projects are mixed methods. You know why? Because I have a specialist who is a mixed methods researcher. Not that I know everything. So I'm getting used to, seeing the comments about mixed methods research, and especially qualitative research. And so I also collect survey data. So I know quite a bit about generalizability and this, I think, this this deep delusion that we as quantitative researchers have about generalizability. I'm like, I'm a pretend survey methodologist. I've stumbled into it. And so the questions that you ask are not neutral, right? It's just that you can hide behind that when you're not doing the asking. Like the questions that I ask on surveys, we ask that we're genuinely trying to be inclusive and aggressively inclusive at that. Now, I think that's scientifically justifiable, but it's also a reflection of my values, and I'm unapologetic about that. Right. So when people talk about generalizability, quantitative research, like that's not the point of qualitative research. And I think coming out with that affirmatively and being clear about how your work is theoretically informed. Another place where I see that quite a bit is when we're talking about underrepresented populations. For example, trans populations. So some people might say, "Oh, well, you should have done it this way." Well, my survey that I'm co-leading, we've got 700 plus trans and non-binary people out of 50,000, which is a lot, right? But we also do address-based sampling. That's not the best way to get trans populations.
Interesting. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
not. It's great to have, but if I were a qualitative researcher, I would say because of structural transphobia, many trans people are out of the labor force, unhoused. And so the way that I am doing this by snowball type sampling is actually a better way to get at this
Interesting.
population. So I try
Yeah.
to really teach people how to be really proactive and not to be defensive in a way that looks toxic, but like I want you to be ready to go toe for toe.
Ooh, okay.
Like you don't have to argue with people, but like this is something that you have spent the last
Yeah.
several years of your life understanding better than anybody else. So going in there to understand your data at a deep level to tell the
Mhm.
story of that intellectual evolution, the growth, the mistakes you made, that comes across as ready for prime time, not student.
Yeah. Okay. Mm. How early should people start preparing for job talks? Is there a benefit to starting much earlier than people expect,
Yes.
for instance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I want to be clear to the people that are listening. I'm not saying in any way that academia is the only choice. Academic jobs are becoming rarer, but I want people who want that option to have the option to be competitive on this market. So I want to say that. And so I think, as someone said on a LinkedIn post today, it's really important for us to be exposing students to the breadth of potential options in industry, in nonprofit sectors, in entrepreneurship, et cetera, right? But given that, I do think it's important to expose people to presenting, exposing people to the skills that are needed in those job talks. And so that could be anything from the 3 minute thesis stuff that I did. And I realized I told students this is absolutely a Trojan horse. I'm here ostensibly to be training you for this competition, but I'm really trying to get you ready for interviews where you're going to have to talk to many, many people, and I need you in 30 seconds or less to be able to describe yourself, just like I did at the top of the podcast, right? I need you to be able to tell the story of your work in a way that is not off putting or shuts people out that are not studying your very narrow slice of the literature, right? So I think having competitions around this kind of skill building, having opportunities for students to go to conferences and training them in what a good conference talk look like. Those are the skills that are building. But ideally, I would say um, really starting to prepare that job talk in the spring and summer before you go on the job market is really ideal because then you'll get to stress test it. You need to stress test these ideas and not just in your colleagues. When I was practicing for my last job talk, I went to my friend's social psychology lab. I practiced with a friend who knows my work really well. That's a demographer. I think I went to a couple other places, but then I went to a Toastmasters club. And at the time, I was just so sick. My boys' bitches made me so sick when I was pregnant. And I remember the last comment I got that was like, "I don't see your personality. There's a lot of jargon here." And I'm thinking to myself, I'm sick and I'm pregnant, and I don't think I said to anybody. And I know this man is not talking to me like this. Um, I feel like all the men are catching strays today, but like I, he was right. Like I had practiced it so many times that I needed to remember what the goal was. And the goal was to give the best possible talk that I could because I knew that would be enough. That my work was enough, I was enough, but it was time to bring other people in to my story.
We have talked about so many topics today that I feel like people who are listening are like, I need to get in touch with Dr. Green. Like, I needed support with this. How can people work with you on their job talks?
Yeah, so I think, in many ways, I think this is something institutions should be responsible for. And I'm more than happy to talk to institutions about bringing me in. I have a art of the job talk workshop that I take, and I take at institutions. We've been getting some great results so far. So that is a big sort of organizing thing that I offer to institutions. So that would be the big thing. If you want to work with me one on one, I have a more limited number of slots, but I do work with people one on one. So the two ways are institutions, directors of graduate studies, or deans. Come talk to me. I can put a little Calendly link in the show notes for you, or a wait list. And then individuals who are working on job talks, I do have a number of limited spots for clients, and I do take one on one clients as well.
Oh, this is so good. Thank you so much for sharing all of these amazing stories with us. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, just thank you so much for having me. And for those of you who, where your budget is a little tight, I try to put lots of information on LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn newsletter, I have an email newsletter, and I now have a YouTube channel where I talk about all of these things. So I want to make
Yay.
sure that wherever you are, you have information to be able to push your progress forward.
I love it. Send me all of those links after this. And for everyone who's listening, the episode is going to go up on Spotify. It's up on YouTube. I'll share this on Instagram for those of you who are catching it live, but maybe have missed the first part. And it will go up on the Social Academic blog in the future as well. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Tiffany Green. Stay on for a sec while we wrap up the live.